Linda, we'll get into the preference game in a second with James, because this is so important. It's so statistically relevant. It matters in terms of the results here. Why do you think One Nation, according to some polls, is almost double where it was 3 years ago?
Well, look, I think election after election in Australia, we've seen votes moving to minor parties. Obviously, that's spreading pretty widely. So we're seeing, people voting for the Teals, for the Greens, for One Nation, splitting off to the left and the right of the political spectrum. But, Paul, I think voters are thinking differently this election. I mean, I spoke to a voter on the weekend. I was door knocking in Sydney, and she told me she'd been a lifelong Liberal voter, but this election she was voting Green and then preferencing Liberal. So, I think people are looking around and trying to understand how their vote is going to be best placed. But the reality is this, actually, for both the Greens and One Nation, the Greens leader tonight again on the ABC has confirmed that he will never vote for Peter Dutton as leader, and James has repeatedly on your show, Paul, admitted that One Nation will never
Pauline
support Labor.
Said it last night. She's no fan of Albo.
It's
Good.
just a risk.
Sensible.
It's
We're
a
the only
risk.
sensible ones.
It's a risk to vote for these minor parties.
hands out.
Australia needs a government that is stable in unstable times.
The talking points turn to majority now.
Well, it's a risk to vote for these minor parties when, in reality, Australia does need a stable government in unstable times. And if you're going to place your vote with One Nation and then they're going to vote for Peter Dutton anyway, you have to ask, what's the point? Why would you risk your vote when you could place it with Labor and form a stable government for Australia?
Go for it, James.
Here's the thing. We've been in a position where we've held that balance of power, or at least shared balance of power in the past, Linda. And never once were we relied upon by the coalition at that stage. Now, we went through a phase where we had Malcolm Turnbull and then we had Scott Morrison. Never, ever, ever did they ever imagine they could rely on our vote. We turned them down on a number of issues when they were so passionate to get legislation passed through. So we look at legislation based on its merits. And that is something that the Australian public realise. That's not an easy feat to be able to turn down a coalition piece of legislation. But ones we didn't agree with, we amended in order to help them pass it if we didn't agree with it in its entirety. There was some shocking legislation that was passed. But I tell you what, nothing worse than Labor legislation. And we have had to turn down support for most Labor legislation, not because we're anti-Labor, because it's bloody terrible legislation, and that's the point to it. And we're constantly going through, when a coalition or Conservative government come in, fixing poor legislation that was drafted by your mob and just waved through by the Greens and other left groups like Jackie Lambie.
All right, I want to give a preview to tomorrow night's debate. Again, full analysis and first analysis will be here at 9 o'clock Australian Eastern Time. Make sure, regardless of what's happening in the dying seconds of the debate, you are here for the hot takes. Lots of people talking about it. But James, just quickly, and again, I've only got a couple of minutes, but still, the preference decisions, right? Am I right in suggesting here that essentially One Nation, libertarian, family first, maybe Christians, maybe trumpets, you all swap it amongst yourselves before you start to throw it towards a major party? In reverse, the Libs are making you wait till fourth in some places before you get a preference. Who's the one playing the dangerous game here?
Well, look, to their credit, in some states the Liberals have put us second, like in Queensland, for example, which we appreciate. And I think, I haven't seen their how to vote card, but I heard a whisper that they may have done it in Tasmania too, which is a good sign. They obviously see merit in Lee Hansen, who's running down here, Pauline's daughter in Tassie, for the Senate. But look, we've had now almost 9 years in that parliament. We've been able to see which minor parties are willing to work with us, knock on our door, come and have discussions. There's so much similarity in a lot of these minor parties. A lot of them just can't get their act together and they can't get the money together to run in every seat like we have. So that's why over 9 years we've been able to say, well, look, Family First are a decent mob. We've been able to say that, the Libertarians are equally good. And if we aren't strong enough to get a seat in our own right, we'd rather one of them. But I'll tell you this, Paul, the last couple of elections, we've never really put a major party on our how to vote cards for the Senate. This time it's so important to get it right because we need to change the balance in the Senate, and that is why we don't want our votes to exhaust. And the Liberal or Liberal National Party have gone at 6. So your votes in the Senate for One Nation, and if you follow our how to vote card, they won't be wasted. You will go to another Conservative party, even if it does end up with the Liberals. Because honestly, it's going to be dire straits for this country if we end up with Labor and the Greens controlling both the lower house and the Senate.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the Western Australian Liberal Party goes themselves first, National second, One Nation third. I'm trying to work on the Tasmanian one as we speak. But let's turn to, all of this matters. Again, all of this maths matters, all of this details matters, and we're trying to unpack it for you before somebody else writes an article somewhere, does their spin. I'll just tell you the numbers and some of the participants as well. All right, this debate tomorrow night. Linda, if it's a draw, it's a win for Anthony Albanese. Why? Because he's currently in front. That said, if the most important thing he said today was that he backs Vegemite, is he just putting the cue in the rack a little bit too early?
Look, I think it's really important that people watch these debates like they did with the Sky News one. I know, it rated really well. And I think it's the first time many Australians have engaged, to be honest, with Peter Dutton and actually considered him to be an alternative Prime Minister. And the more they look, the more they see the false promise that nuclear power is, that he still won't put a cost on it, that he still is unable to account for its danger, that Labor has a real plan, that he has that Anthony Albanese has a real plan to relieve people's cost of living with practical measures, tax cuts in the budget, practical measures like help for free TAFE, childcare, the things that actually matter to normal Australians, James, unlike your group, which of course the majority of the Australians don't support.
Linda, you're about to make 18 increases to taxes in the next term of Parliament.
In people's lives,
you're putting
and this is the kind of debate
alcohol tax,
we'll see
cigarette
tomorrow.
tax, fuel tax, and you'll do it 18 times in the next term of Parliament. The same way you've done 18 increases through excise tax to every Australian. You haven't made their lives any better, and your piddly little $5 will go nowhere when another 18 of those taxes
well, James,
are lobbed
you might
on
think
every
$5
single
is piddly,
household.
but that's a lot of money for many Australians to make in their pocket.
Do you know what I did today? For $5, $5 got me a trolley to lug my luggage around at the airport today. It buys you nothing.
Correct.